The last giant who spoke our language, what he said the day the soldiers arrived. They found him at the blue hour, when the mountain held its breath. He had been sitting against the same granite outcrop for 47 years. That was not an estimate. The giant counted. He counted every dawn, every landslide, every time a fox gave birth in the hollow of an old oak 3 valleys away. Counting was one of the last things he had left. His name, in the language that was dying with him, sounded like wind pulling a loose tent peg from frozen ground. The soldiers would never hear it. They called him Gorm, after a demon in their children's fables. He knew this. He had heard their mothers whisper the name over cook fires for 20 generations. On the morning the soldiers came, the giant was weaving. Not cloth. He was weaving air. That is what the youngest villager, a girl named Sanja who sometimes brought him salt she stole from the garrison stores, called it. Weaving air. He took the morning mist between his thumb and the strange third knuckle that all giants have, and he pulled it into strands. Clear strands. Strands that held a memory of yesterday's rain. He tied knots in them. Each knot was a word. He had been weaving words into the mist for 300 years. The mist did not hold them for more than a few hours. He did this deliberately. He did not want monuments. He wanted the language to evaporate the way breath evaporates from a dying mouth. Gently. Like it had never been forced. The soldiers did not know this. They had marched through the night from the low forts, 37 men in steel and boiled leather, carrying crossbows with iron-tipped bolts. Their captain was a woman named Elara Voss, 42 years old, twice widowed, promoted because she had burned a village that refused to pay grain tax. She did not hate giants. She did not think about them at all. They were an entry in a campaign log. Gorm, last of the northern speech giants. Eliminate. Estimated difficulty, moderate. She had read that line 6 times. Each time she felt nothing. The trail to the giant's seat was steep but not dangerous. That surprised her. She had expected broken ground, traps, the remnants of some ancient fortress. Instead the path was almost courteous. Switchbacks laid so gently that a loaded mule could climb them. Stones placed like stepping stones across the one boggy section. At one turn, someone had carved a handrail into the rock face, not a giant's hand, but a human one. Narrow. Fingers. She stopped there for 3 seconds, her palm resting in the stone groove, and felt the ghost of another palm. A human palm. Very old. Very patient. Captain, said her sergeant, a man named Koval who cleaned his teeth with a knife blade every morning. We have visual. The giant was smaller than she expected. The book said northern speech giants reached 12 cubits at the shoulder. Gorm was maybe 8. His spine curved like a bent bow. His skin was the color of wet limestone, cracked in places where lichen had taken root. One eye was clouded white. The other watched them come, not with fear, not with rage, but with the same mild attention he might give a weather front moving across the distant sea. He did not stand. Not because he could not. Elara would learn later, from Sanja, that the giant had not stood in 47 years because he had made a promise to a dead woman. But not yet. At this moment she saw only an old creature, half stone himself, sitting in a bed of crushed thyme and wild marjoram. The smell reached them before the sound did. Warm. Green. Almost domestic. Archers, she said quietly. Half circle. Don't loose until I raise my hand. The giant raised his own hand. Not to strike. Not to signal. He raised his open palm, fingers spread, the way a person might greet a neighbor across a fence. Then he spoke. His voice was not loud. That was the first thing everyone remembered later. It should have been loud. A creature that size, with lungs that could inflate like bellows, with a chest that could echo across valleys, his voice should have broken glass. Instead it came out like cello strings wrapped in fleece. Low. warm, slightly cracked at the edges, as if he had not spoken in years. He said, "You have come a long way to kill someone who has already decided to die." Silence. The archers looked at each other. Not because they understood him. They did not. But the shape of the sounds, the rise and fall of them, felt familiar. Like a language their own language had once dreamed of becoming. "What did he say?" Koval whispered. Ilara shook her head. The report said the giant spoke a dead tongue. No translator. No records. The last human who could understand him had died 50 years ago, a hermit woman named Rhoda who lived in a collapsed watchtower and traded mushrooms for the giant stories. Her grave was marked by a single white stone near the switchbacks. The soldiers had passed it without noticing. But Ilara had noticed something else. The giant had raised his hand. Open palm. No weapon. Not even a rock close to his seat. He had arranged his death place like a man arranging his bed before sleep. She lowered her hand. Just slightly. The archers did not loose. "Does anyone know his language?" she asked. No one answered. The giant smiled. It was a terrible smile and a gentle one at the same time. His teeth were worn to nubs, like a very old horse. His lips were cracked. But his one good eye was clear, bright, and it contained a kind of pleasure. Not the pleasure of victory. The pleasure of being understood even without translation. He spoke again. Longer this time. "I am the last of the Khmorat. That is not our true name, but it is the name your ancestors gave us, and I have decided to keep it because your ancestors were kind. They brought me honey when I was young. They let me watch their children learn to walk. They did not understand my words, but they laughed when I made funny sounds. One of them, a woman named Elka, who had red hair and a limp, she learned 3 of my words. 3. Stone. Mother. Stay. She said them wrong. Her mouth could not make the glottal stop. But she tried. She tried for 40 years. He paused. The mist strands he had been weaving drifted apart on a breeze. He watched them go with what looked like relief. You do not know Elka. You do not know Rhoda. You know only the stories your officers tell you, that I am dangerous, that I remember a time before your God, that my bones can be ground into a powder that makes men brave in battle. None of that is true. I am dangerous the way a falling leaf is dangerous. I remember everything, but memory is not a weapon. And my bones, when you grind them, will smell like burned hair and do nothing else. You have been lied to. I am sorry for that. Not because I will die, I have been ready to die for 100 years, but because you will have to carry the lie home. That is heavier than any giant bone. Ilara heard none of this. But she saw his mouth move. She saw the shape of his throat working. She saw, for one strange instant, the ghost of a second language behind his words, not translation, but the echo of a human woman speaking giant words badly. Stone. Mother. Stay. The giant coughed. A whole-body cough that shook lichen from his shoulders. When he recovered, he looked directly at Ilara. Not at her rank. Not at her weapons. At her. The way her grandfather might have looked at her if her grandfather had been 700 years old and had forgotten nothing. You are the captain, he said. I know because you stand like a woman who has outlived 2 husbands. There is grief in your left shoulder. It sits higher than the right. That is where you carried a child once, on your hip, for many years. The child is dead. I am sorry. I do not say that to hurt you. I say it because it is the truth, and you have come here to kill me, and the least I can do before you kill me is let you be seen. No one has seen you in a long time. I can see you. It is the only magic I have left. She took a step back. The soldiers noticed. Koval's hand went to his sword. Captain, he said again, sharper now. Wait, she said. Her voice was strange. Thinner. The giant nodded, as if she had answered him. Then he turned his head slowly, scanning the 37 men and women in a half-circle around him. He looked at each face for a full 3 seconds. Later, 3 of the soldiers would dream about his eye. Not the blind one. The good one. You are afraid, he said. Not of me. Of something else. Of the thing you will become after you kill me. That is good. That fear is the only honest thing left in this war. Keep it. Feed it. It will save you one day, or it will kill you cleanly, and either way it is better than the numbness your commanders want you to wear. He reached down slowly. Every soldier flinched. 37 crossbows tilted. But he only picked up a small stone from the ground, a river stone, smooth, dark gray, worn by water that had not flowed for 1,000 years. He held it in his palm. This stone was here before I sat down. It will be here after I am gone. Your great-great-great-grandchildren will kick it while they walk to their weddings. That is not a threat. That is a description of how small we are. You and me. Even me. Especially me. He set the stone down exactly where he had found it. Then he folded his hands in his lap and said nothing. The silence lasted a full minute. A jay screamed in the oak forest below. Wind moved across the giant's lichen patches. One of the younger archers, a boy of 19 named Dorn, lowered his crossbow until the stock touched the dirt. No one told him to pick it back up. Ilara walked forward. Koval said, "Captain, don't." She kept walking. 10 paces. 20. She stopped at the giant's knee. His knee was the height of her chest. She could smell him now, old stone, time, something sweet like overripe pear. His breath moved her hair. "Can you understand me?" she asked. The giant tilted his head. His good eye blinked once, slowly, like an owl. "I don't know if you can understand me," she said. "But I'm going to say this anyway. I don't want to kill you. I've killed enough things. But if I go back down this mountain without your head, they will send 300 soldiers tomorrow. They will burn the forest. They will question every village within a day's walk. They will find the girl who brings you salt. You know which girl I mean. They will hurt her. They will hurt her until she tells them where you've gone, even if you haven't gone anywhere. This is not a choice I am making. This is a choice that was made for me 40 miles away by people who will never see your face." She stopped. Her voice had cracked on face. The giant looked at her. His expression did not change. But something in his breathing shifted. A long, slow exhale that smelled of pear and rain and something else, something older, like the inside of a cave where no one has ever lit a fire. Then he spoke again, softer than before. So soft that even the nearest archer could not hear. I understood every word. Ilara's knees buckled. She caught herself on his knee. His skin was warm. Not cold, not stone cold, but warm like a sun-baked wall. "You," she started. "I have understood every word spoken in this valley for 300 years, he said. Your language is not my language. But I learned yours. I learned it from Elka, the red-haired woman who could not say stay. I learned it from Rodda, who talked in her sleep. I learned it from children who threw stones at me when I was young and I pretended not to feel them because I did not want to frighten them. I learned every word. I have never spoken a single one of them out loud until now. Why? Because if I had spoken your language, you would have asked me for things. You would have asked me to fight your wars. To bless your crops. To tell you the future. I do not fight. I do not bless. The future is a closed door. I only remember. And remembering is not useful to people like you. People like you want weapons. I am not a weapon. I am a library with no doors. So I stayed silent. I let you forget that I could speak. I let you make me into a demon in your fables. It was easier. For everyone. He paused. His blind eye seemed to be looking at something far behind her, not a thing, but a time. A time when giants and humans shared the same valleys, the same salt, the same stories told badly in two different languages. But you came here with a girl's salt in your pocket, he said. Not literally. You do not know the girl. But you have a girl of your own, somewhere in your memory, the one you carried on your hip. She is the only reason you are still standing here talking to me instead of giving the order. That girl, dead or alive, loves you. And because she loves you, you came close enough to hear me. And because you came close enough to hear me, I am going to speak what is left of my language. One last time. Not to the soldiers. To the air. To the stone. To the girl who is not here but who will exist in 100 years, reading this story in a book she does not yet know she will find. He straightened his spine. For the first time in 47 years, the giant sat fully upright. His joints crackled like wet wood in a fire. His breath came deep and slow. And then he began to speak. The first telling. The giant spoke for 3 hours. Not continuously. He paused between sentences, sometimes for a full minute, as if each word cost him something he would never be able to replace. His voice did not grow louder. It grew deeper, more resonant, the way a bell continues to sing after it has been struck but before the sound fades entirely. The soldiers lowered their crossbows one by one. Not because they understood the words. Because the shape of the sounds entered their chests like a second heartbeat. Ilara did not move from his knee. She had sat down at some point, her back against the warm stone of his shin, her hands folded in her lap like a child at a fireside. Koval stood behind her with his sword drawn but pointed at the ground. He was crying. He did not know why. The tears ran down his face and dripped onto the crushed thyme, and he did not wipe them away. The giant's words were not a story in the way humans told stories. There was no beginning, no middle, no end that Ilara could identify. Instead he spoke in layers. A word about a river in spring. Then a word about his mother's hands. Then a description of the first human he had ever seen. A boy, barefoot, carrying a dead rabbit, who had looked up at the young giant and laughed instead of screaming. That laugh had changed something in the giant's chest. He did not have a word for what it changed. He used a giant word that meant, roughly, the moment when two different creatures recognize that they are both afraid of the dark in the same way. He told them about the language itself. The language of the Khmorat, he said, had no word for mine. The closest approximation was temporary companion. A giant did not own a stone. The stone agreed to be held for a while. A giant did not own a valley. The valley tolerated the giant's presence until it didn't. This was not philosophy. This was grammar. You could not say my child in the old tongue. You said the child who is walking near me today. You could not say my death. You said the leaving that has been waiting. Ilara understood none of this linguistically. But she felt it. The way you feel a storm coming not because you see clouds but because your scar tissue aches. The giant spoke for a second hour. His voice began to fray at the edges. He told them about the war. Not the war the soldiers were fighting, the petty border war between lowland kingdoms that had sent them here with crossbows and a captain who had outlived 2 husbands. He told them about the real war. The war that had ended giants. The war that had started before humans had learned to smelt iron, when the world was still soft at the edges and creatures larger than mountains walked through valleys like you or I might walk through a doorway. There was no battle, he said. That is what your songs get wrong. There is never a battle when a people ends. There is a slow forgetting. There is a winter that lasts too long. There is a disease that comes from a direction no one thought to watch. There is a child born with the wrong shape of ear, and no one teaches her the old words because the old words seem heavy and useless, and then she grows up and has her own children, And one day someone asks for the word for snow that falls so gently it does not seem to be falling at all, and the last person who knew that word has been dead for 40 years, and no one notices the loss because the snow is still falling the same way it always fell. He stopped. His hands were trembling. The giant's hands, which had woven mist into strands for 47 years, trembled like old leaves. I am the last not because I am strong, he said. I am the last because I am stubborn. Stubbornness is not strength. Stubbornness is the refusal to admit that the door has closed. I have been refusing to admit that for 300 years. Every morning I wake up and say the old words to myself. Every morning the words feel thinner. Every morning I forget one word from the day before. I have forgotten more words than you will ever know. The word for the sound a deer makes when it realizes it is not alone. Gone. The word for the particular weight of a sleeping child's head on your shoulder. Gone. The word for gratitude that is so large it becomes pain. Gone. 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 He said the last gone in the human language. Ilara heard it clearly. She looked up at his face. His good eye was wet. You asked me why I never spoke your language, he said. Now you know. Because if I spoke your language, I would have to admit that my own language was already dead. Silence was denial. Silence was my way of keeping the door open. But you came with your crossbows and your captain who carries a dead child on her hip, and you made silence impossible. So I am speaking. Not because I want to. Because I am the last. That is what the last one does. It speaks until it cannot speak anymore. The third hour began. The sun had moved across the sky. The blue hour was long gone. Now the light was gold and horizontal, pouring through the oak forest like honey through a sieve. Shadows stretched. The soldiers had stopped pretending to stand at attention. They had sat down in the grass, their crossbows lying beside them like forgotten tools. Koval was no longer crying, but his face was wet with dried tears. He had sheathed his sword without remembering doing so. The giant told them about his mother. Her name, in the old tongue, was impossible to say with a human mouth. But he gave them a human approximation, Mara of the open hand. She had been the largest of the northern speech giants, not in size but in presence. When she walked, the ground did not shake. The ground remembered itself more clearly. When she spoke, birds did not fly away. They flew closer. She had a way of saying a single word, just one word, the word for attention, that could quiet a storm. Not stop it. Quiet it. Make the rain fall softer for a few heartbeats. She taught me the language in a cave that no longer exists, he said. It was a limestone cave with a spring at the back. The water tasted like cold metal and old bones. She would dip her finger in the spring and draw words on the cave wall. The words glowed for a moment, really glowed, I am not making a metaphor, and then faded. She said that was the nature of words. They glow for a moment. Then they fade. But the fading is not the end. The fading is the word returning to the stone that gave it. The stone remembers. Even when no one is left who can read the glow. He looked down at Ilara. She had fallen asleep against his shin. Not from boredom. From exhaustion. She had not slept well in years, not since the child on her hip had stopped breathing in her arms during a winter fever. The giant's voice had reached something in her that sleep had been trying to reach for a long time. She slept without dreaming. Her face was younger in sleep. The giant looked at her face and did not wake her. He spoke softer now, almost a whisper. The soldiers will kill me today. That is what soldiers do. They kill what they are told to kill. I do not blame them. They are young. Most of them have never seen a giant before. They have only seen the pictures in their prayer books, the pictures where giants are eating children or crushing temples. They will be surprised, after they kill me, to find that I do not look like the pictures. I look like an old man who has been sitting in the sun too long. They will feel strange about this. Some of them will feel strange for the rest of their lives. That is not my revenge. That is just what happens when you kill something and discover it was never a demon. He shifted his weight. His spine sang with pain. 4 to 7 years of sitting against the same granite outcrop had welded his vertebrae into a shape that was no longer fully humanoid. But the pain was old. He had made peace with it the way you make peace with a neighbor who plays music too loud. Not friendship, not enmity, just a tired accommodation. I have one thing left to tell you, he said. Not to the soldiers. To the air. To the stone. To the girl who will exist in 100 years. This is the thing I have been saving for the end. This is the thing I did not tell Rhoda. This is the thing I did not tell Elka. This is the thing I have never told anyone because it is too heavy for one creature to carry alone, but I have carried it alone because there was no one else left to help me carry it. He closed his good eye. The blind eye stayed open, staring at something that was not in the valley. We did not die out because of war, he said. We did not die out because of disease. We did not die out because the climate changed or the rivers dried up or the animals we hunted learned to hide. We died out because we chose to. One by one. Family by family. Valley by valley. We stopped having children. Not because we could not. Because we looked at the world and saw that the age of giants was over. Not ending. Over. Already ended. We were just the last leaves on a tree that had been dead for 1,000 years. It is very hard to be a leaf on a dead tree. The wind is cold. The sun is lonely. The other leaves have already fallen and turned to soil. You stay on the branch because staying is what you know. But you do not put out new buds. You do not reach for the light. You wait. You wait for the wind that is strong enough to take you. His voice cracked. Not slightly. Catastrophically. A sound like a tree splitting in a frozen forest. I am the last leaf, he said. I have been the last leaf for 300 years. Every morning I wake up and I am surprised. Not that I am still alive, that stopped surprising me a long time ago. I am surprised that the world still turns. I am surprised that the sun still rises. I am surprised that birds still build nests and fish still swim upstream and human children still laugh at things that are not funny. The world should have stopped when my people chose to end. But the world does not care about our choices. The world keeps turning. The world is cruel that way. Or kind. I have never decided which. He opened his good eye. Ilara was still asleep. Koval was watching the giant with an expression that was not hatred, not fear, not pity, just attention. The same attention the giant had given the weather front over the distant sea. You want to know what I said to the soldiers when they arrived, the giant said. You have been reading this story, this long, slow, too heavy story, because you want to know what the last giant said. But I have already told you. I have told you for 3 hours. The last giant did not say one thing. He said everything. He said his mother's name. He said the word for snow that falls too gently to seem like falling. He said the name of a cave that no longer exists. He said all of it. Every word he could remember. Because that is what the last one does. It empties itself completely. It leaves nothing behind. Not even silence. He looked up at the sky. The sun was beginning to lower toward the western ridge. The gold light had turned orange, then rust, then the deep violet that comes before true dark. I am tired, he said. Not the tired of a long day. The tired of a long life. I have been tired for 100 years. I have been pretending not to be tired because pretending was the last job I had. But the soldiers are here. The crossbows are loaded. The captain has slept for the first time in years. My work is done. He reached down with one enormous finger and touched Ilara's hair. She did not wake. The touch was so light that it did not disturb a single strand. Then he sat back against the granite outcrop, folded his hands in his lap, and waited. What the stone remembers. Ilara woke to the sound of Koval weeping. Not crying. Weeping. The kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than grief, a place where grief has been stored so long it has fermented into something else. Something closer to gratitude. She had never heard Koval make that sound. She had seen him take an arrow through the shoulder and pull it out himself without a wince. She had seen him bury his younger brother after a failed siege, his face as blank as a wall. But here, on this mountain, with the giant's last words still humming in the air like the echo of a bell that had been struck an hour ago, Koval was weeping. She sat up slowly. Her back was stiff. She had slept against the giant's shin for 3 hours, curled like a child, and her body remembered a kind of rest it had not known since before her daughter died. For a moment, just a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then she saw the giant's face. He was looking at the sunset. The soldiers had not moved. 37 men and women, still in their half-circle, still holding crossbows that had long since been lowered. Some of them were sitting. Some were lying on their backs, staring at the sky. A few were praying. Not the official prayers of the lowland temples. Private prayers. The kind you make up when the official prayers have failed you. Ilara recognized the shape of those prayers because she had made them herself, in the dark, after the fever had taken her daughter. The giant spoke one last time. His voice was barely a whisper. The soldiers at the edge of the half-circle could not hear him. Only Ilara, still close enough to touch his shin, and Koval, who had moved closer without realizing it, and the young archer Dorn, who had crawled forward on his belly like a penitent. "Do not be afraid of what comes after," the giant said. "Not my death. That is small. I mean what comes after you go home. After you tell your commanders that the giant is dead. After they write their reports. After they grind my bones for powder that will not work. After they forget my name and replace it with a saint or a demon or a footnote. What comes after is the silence. The silence is not empty. The silence is full of everything I just said. You will hear it when you are alone. You will hear it in the moment before sleep. You will hear it in the voice of your child when your child asks you a question you do not know how to answer. Do not run from that silence. That silence is me. That silence is my mother. That silence is the word for gratitude that is so large it becomes pain. I am giving it to you. It is the only thing I own." He closed his good eye. Then he opened it again. "One more thing," he said. "The girl. The one who brings me salt. Her name is Sanja. She lives in the village at the base of the southern switchback, in a house with a yellow door. She has a mole on her left cheek and a laugh that sounds like breaking glass. She is not my daughter. But she has been bringing me salt for 7 years. That is longer than most of my own kind kept me company. Do not hurt her. If you hurt her, the silence will not be kind to you. The silence will remember. I will not be there to remember. But the stone will. The stone remembers everything." He looked at Ilara. "You understand," he said. It was not a question. Ilara nodded. "Then give the order," the giant said. "And do not hesitate. Hesitation is a kind of cruelty. It makes the waiting longer. I have been waiting for 300 years. I am ready to stop." Ilara stood up. Her legs were numb. She did not feel them. She turned to face her soldiers. 37 faces looked back at her. Not one of them looked like a soldier anymore. They looked like people who had just witnessed something they would spend the rest of their lives trying to explain. "Archers," she said. Her voice did not crack. "On my command." The crossbows came up. Not fast. Not eager. They came up the way a man lifts a shovel when he has been asked to dig a grave for someone he loves. The iron bolts caught the last of the sunset. They glowed red for a moment, like embers. The giant did not close his eyes. He looked at the sky. He looked at the first star, faint and white, appearing in the deep violet above the eastern ridge. He smiled. Not the terrible smile from before. A different smile. A small smile. The smile of someone who has finally been given permission to stop pretending. Elara looked at the giant's face. She looked at his one good eye. She looked at the lichen on his shoulders, the crushed thyme around his feet, the river stone he had picked up and put back down. She looked at the place where his mother's hand had once drawn glowing words on a cave wall that no longer existed. She raised her hand. She did not lower it. An hour passed. Then another. The sun set completely. The stars came out in their thousands. The soldiers did not move. The giant did not move. Elara stood with her hand raised, and the command did not come, and the crossbows stayed aimed, and the bolts did not fly. Finally, Koval spoke. "Captain," he said. Quietly. "Not a challenge. An offer." Elara lowered her hand. "We are not killing him," she said. No one argued. No one saluted. No one said yes sir or no sir or what will we tell the commanders. The soldiers simply lowered their crossbows, one by one, and sat back down in the grass. Some of them began to cry. Some of them began to laugh. A few of them began to talk to each other in voices so soft that Elara could not hear the words. She did not need to hear them. She knew what they were saying. They were saying the giant's words. Not in the giant's language. In their own language. They were finding translations. Clumsy translations. Translations that would never capture the original. But they were trying. That was the thing. They were trying. The giant looked at Elara. "You will be executed for this," he said. "Not today. Not tomorrow. But when you return to the low forts, they will ask you why the giant still breathes. You will tell them the truth. They will not believe you. They will call you a traitor. They will take your rank. They will take your freedom. They may take your life. I have seen this happen before. It happens every time a soldier chooses mercy over orders. The mercy is never the problem. The mercy is always what gets punished. Because mercy reminds people that they have a choice. The people in power do not want you to know that you have a choice. "I know," Elara said. "You have a daughter's ghost on your hip," the giant said. "She would have wanted this." Elara did not answer. She did not need to. The giant took a long, slow breath. The breath smelled of pear and rain and old stone. It smelled like the end of something and the beginning of something else. He turned his head toward the southern switchback, where the village with the yellow door lay hidden in the darkness below. "Sanja will come tomorrow," he said. "She will bring salt. She will find me alive. She will laugh that sounds like breaking glass. Then she will cry. Then she will sit down next to me and she will ask me what happened. And I will tell her. In her language. For the first time. I will tell her everything." He paused. "That is the thing about being the last," he said. "You think you are alone. You are not alone. There is always someone bringing salt. There is always a girl with a mole on her cheek and a laugh. Like breaking glass. There is always a captain who has outlived 2 husbands and still chooses mercy. You are not alone. You were never alone. You just forgot how to see the people who were standing next to you." The giant settled back against the granite outcrop. He did not close his eyes. He watched the stars. The soldiers watched the stars with him. Elara sat down again, this time not against his shin but next to it, her back to the stone, her face turned upward. No one spoke for a long time. Then Dorn, the young archer, the boy of 19 who had lowered his crossbow before anyone else, began to hum. It was not a song Elara recognized. It had no words. It was just a tune, simple and slow, the kind of tune a mother might hum to a child who could not sleep. One by one, the other soldiers joined in. Not all of them. Some of them just listened. But enough. Enough to fill the valley with a sound that was not human and not giant. Something in between. Something new. The giant listened to the humming. He did not cry. Giants do not cry the way humans cry. But something happened in his chest. Something that had not happened in 300 years. A loosening. A warming. A small, quiet thaw in a place he had thought was frozen forever. He opened his mouth. And he hummed with them. His voice was too low for human ears to fully register. But the soldiers felt it. A vibration in their sternums. A resonance in their teeth. A feeling of being held by something much larger than themselves, something that did not intend to crush them, something that intended only to remind them that they existed. They hummed together, the giant and the soldiers, for the rest of the night. In the morning, Ilara gave her soldiers a choice. You can go back to the low forts, she said. You can tell them the giant is dead. You can show them his bones. We can find old bones from a cave. There are always old bones. You can collect your pay and go home to your families. No one will ever know. Or you can stay here. With me. With him. We will not be soldiers anymore. We will be something else. I do not know what. But I know that whatever it is, it will not involve killing old creatures who have already decided to die. 36 soldiers chose to stay. One soldier, a woman named Jorun, who had a husband and 3 children in a village near the low forts, chose to go back. She went back with a story. The story was that she had been separated from the company during the night, that she had gotten lost in the fog, that she had found her way down the mountain alone. She did not mention the giant. She did not mention Ilara. She mentioned nothing at all. She collected her pay, went home to her family, and never spoke of the mountain again. But she hummed. In the evenings, when her children were asleep and her husband was mending tools by the fire, she hummed. A tune with no words. A tune that made her children sleep deeper and her husband dream of meadows he had never seen. She hummed until she was an old woman. And when she died, her eldest daughter sat by her bed and heard her mother's last breath come out not as a gasp but as a single, quiet note. The note hung in the air for a long moment. Then it faded. The stone remembered. The giant did not die that day. He did not die that year. He did not die for another 11 years. He spent those years teaching. Not just Sanja, though Sanja learned more of the old language than any human had learned in 500 years. He taught the soldiers who had stayed. He taught them words for things they had never had words for. The word for the particular silence after a lie has been told. The word for the way a forest smells after the first rain of autumn. The word for the shape your hands make when you are waiting for news. He could not teach them everything. The old language was too large for human throats, too complex for human ears. But he taught them enough. Enough to change the way they saw the world. Enough that when they had children, those children grew up speaking 2 languages, the lowland tongue and the broken, beautiful fragments of the tongue of the Khmorat. Ilara never returned to the low forts. She lived on the mountain for the rest of her life. She grew old there. Her hair turned white. Her left shoulder, the one that had carried her daughter, slowly relaxed. She stopped carrying the grief like a stone. She carried it like a bird, lightly, carefully, ready to let it go when the time came. The time came on a winter morning, 11 years after the soldiers arrived. Ilara was sitting next to the giant, her hand on his knee, watching the snow fall. The snow fell gently. So gently that it did not seem to be falling at all. Do you remember the word for this? She asked. The giant was very old now. Older than he had ever been. His good eye was dim. His voice was a thread. But he remembered. He told her the word. It took him a long time to say it. The word was not a sound. It was a sensation. A memory of a memory. A feeling of being small and safe inside something larger than yourself. It was the word his mother had said to him on the night he was born. It was the word the cave walls had glowed with, before the glow faded. Ilara closed her eyes. She did not open them again. The giant sat with her body for 3 days. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He just sat, holding her hand in his enormous fingers, and spoke the old words to her. Words she could no longer hear. Words the stone would remember. On the 4th day, Sanja came up the mountain with salt. She found the giant alone. Ilara's body had already been covered by a thin layer of snow. The giant's hand was still resting where her hand had been. She's gone, Sanja said. Yes, the giant said. Are you going to go too? The giant was quiet for a long time. Soon, he said. But not yet. There is one more thing I need to do. What? I need to teach you the rest. Sanja sat down next to him. She was not a girl anymore. She was a woman of 24, with a mole on her left cheek and a laugh like breaking glass. She had learned more of the old language than any human in centuries. But she had not learned all of it. There was always more. The old language was like the sea. You could spend your whole life swimming in it and never touch the bottom. All of it, she asked. All of it, the giant said. Every word I remember. Every word my mother taught me. Every word that glowed on the cave wall. It will take years. You will forget some of it. Your children will forget more. Your children's children will only remember fragments. That is fine. Fragments are enough. Fragments are how language survives. Language does not survive in whole things. It survives in broken things that are loved. Sanja unpacked the salt. She poured a small pile of it into the giant's palm. He raised it to his nose and breathed in. The smell made him think of the sea. The sea he had not seen in 700 years. The sea where his mother had taught him to float on his back and watch the clouds. Start with the word for salt, he said. I already know the word for salt. Then start with the word for the feeling you get when you give someone salt and they receive it with an open hand. Sanja thought for a moment. I don't think we have a word for that, she said. Exactly, the giant said. That is why I need to teach you. The giant died 3 years later. He died in the spring, during the thaw. The snow melted off the mountain in great rushing streams that sounded like laughter. The soldiers who had stayed, those who were still alive, gathered around him. Sanja sat at his feet, her hand on his ankle. She was crying. But she was also smiling. She had learned the word for that feeling too. The feeling of crying and smiling at the same time. The giant had taught it to her on the last day of the 2nd year. It was a long word. A complicated word. A word that involved a movement of the tongue that no human had ever made before Sanja. She made it perfectly now, under her breath, as the giant's good eye closed for the last time. The soldiers did not kill him. They had never killed him. They had come to kill him, and then they had not, and then they had stayed, and then they had buried Ilara, and then they had learned to hum, and then they had grown old, and then they had taught their children, and then their children had taught their children, and the language of the Khmorat did not die. It did not live either. Not the way it had lived when giants spoke it in caves that no longer existed. But it existed. In fragments. In songs. In the way certain people in certain valleys still hummed a tune with no words when they were trying to fall asleep. In the way children sometimes pointed at a particular kind of snowfall, the kind that falls so gently it does not seem to be falling at all, and said a word that their parents had never taught them. The stone remembered. The stone remembered everything. And somewhere, in the space between what is spoken and what is not, the last giant who spoke the old language sat against a granite outcrop, weaving mist into strands that would not hold, and waited for the sound of boots on the switchback path. The boots never came. Not that day. Not ever. The soldiers had chosen differently. Not because they were good. Not because they were brave. Because they had heard a voice that spoke to the part of them that had not yet learned to be afraid. The part that still remembered what it was like to be small and safe inside something larger than yourself. That part did not die. It never dies. It just forgets, sometimes, that it is there. But it comes back. It always comes back. In the blue hour, when the mountain holds its breath. In the shape of a handrail carved into stone. In the laugh of a girl who brings salt to an old creature who has already decided to die. The language is not dead. It is sleeping. And one day, someone will wake it up.